Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rehab Act at 50, Part 2, Our Future, Youth and Young Adult Engagement and Involvement in Disability Advocacy. My name is Bailey Reeves, and I will be providing technical assistance during the meeting. Closed captioning and ASL interpreting are being provided. To view the interpreter, you may also set your screen to gallery view. You can switch between gallery and speaker view in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom window. To view the captioning, click on the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. All attendee microphones have been muted to avoid background noise. We ask that you keep your webcam turned off to allow the attendees to easily view the interpreter. During the Q&A session, please use the chat box to ask a question by sending them directly to Anjali Forber-Pratt. Questions will be read aloud for the speakers to answer. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be made available for future viewing. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Anjali Forber-Pratt, Director of the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Dr. Forber-Pratt, please proceed.
Hello, and welcome to the Administration for Community Living's second webinar about the past, present, and future of independent living as we commemorate 50 years since the signing of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, also known as the Rehab Act. My name, as you heard, is Dr. Anjali Forber-Pratt, and I am the Director of the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research within the Administration for Community Living. I also serve as the Chair of the Interagency Committee on Disability Research. Today, I am wearing a purple shirt with a black suit jacket, and I have brown skin and long black hair that is up in a ponytail, and not seen on screen, I'm sitting in a manual wheelchair, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. We are here today to commemorate the Rehab Act of 1973. This webinar aims to identify and recognize the new generation of young leaders and youth who are a part of the disability advocacy community. The Rehab Act created the first civil rights legislation protecting disabled people against discrimination, Section 504, and also created both the Independent Living Services and Centers for Independent Living Programs and the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Both of these programs are centers within the Administration for Community Living, which provides funding for SIL programs and for the research projects awarded through competitive grants at NIDLR. SILs are run by people with disabilities, and they operate as grassroots organizations deeply connected to the needs of their local communities. Over the years, these centers have played a significant role in advancing the rights and opportunities of people with disabilities, as well as raising awareness about disability issues. These centers are also highly valuable for youth and young leaders to find, learn, and connect with the disability community to learn about activism. As I reflect on my own personal experience growing up with a disability, I distinctly remember the tremendous role that my local Center for Independent Living played for me as a teenager when I was just beginning to learn about disability advocacy and learn about my rights, which was extremely important as I did eventually go on to sue my school district in federal court because of discrimination on the basis of disability. It was empowering to learn from seasoned disabled activists, which is why I'm so thrilled to be your MC here today. NIDLR funds applied research towards the development of new knowledge and innovative technological devices, interventions, and other informational products to enhance community living, health and function, and employment among people with disabilities. I'm also thrilled to wear my passion for research hat in this conversation too. It's exciting to be able to truly bring together both of these key aspects that the Rehab Act helped to create to guide our conversation today. A shared goal of ours at ACL is working to maximize the independence, well-being, and health of people with disabilities and of older adults across the lifespan and for their families and caregivers. Our ACL-funded SILs work to do this through information sharing and advocacy, and NIDLR does this through funding external research. And we have a unique project that is jointly funded from both ACL's Administration on Disabilities and NIDLR that brings these two elements together. For the first part of today's webinar, we'll have the opportunity to hear from the researchers involved with this unique research project, Dr. Elizabeth Cardoso and Dr. Purvi Sivak. We did want to also acknowledge that the SIL Executive Director with the Center for Independence the Center for Independence of the Disabled in New York, Dr. Sharon McLennan-Weir, who has worked very closely with this research team, was also invited to participate, but due to scheduling, she was unable to attend, but has been heavily involved in the work that Drs. Cardoso and Sivak will be sharing momentarily. There will be an opportunity to ask these presenters any questions that you have about their presentation too. Then we have the incredible opportunity to hear from a panel of experts of young adults and youth disabled leaders. We are extremely lucky that ACL hosted a summer intern from the American Association of Persons with Disabilities, also known as AAPD, Stephanie Picasso. And we felt that this would be a perfect opportunity for her, an actual young disabled adult leader, to moderate this panel and discussion with us here today. And then we will hear from Dr. Amanda Riekert, who is a project officer within NIDLR, for some closing remarks. Without further ado, we are going to learn more about the Minority Youth and Centers for Independent Living, also known as MySIL project, with this jointly awarded grant at Hunter College School of Education in partnership for the Center for Independence of the Disabled New York, Independent Living Rehabilitation Utilization, ILRU, and Mathematica. The goal of the MySIL project is to support NIDLR's priority for generating and sharing new knowledge that empowers SILs to improve transition outcomes of out-of-school youth from minority backgrounds. Dr. Elizabeth Cardoso is the principal investigator for this grant, and she is the chairperson and professor in counseling programs at Hunter College and has been there for the last 18 years. She has published extensively in the areas of substance abuse assessment and treatment, multicultural counseling, psychosocial aspects of chronic illness and disability, and evidence-based practice. She received her PhD in rehabilitation psychology and is also a licensed psychologist and certified rehabilitation counselor. Dr. Purvi Sivak is a senior researcher at Mathematica and former professor of economics at Hunter College. Dr. Sivak brings her expertise in survey design, as well as extensive knowledge of programs supporting individuals with disabilities, including Medicaid, vocational rehab, SSI, and SSDI. With over a dozen years of experience researching the impact these programs have on post-secondary and long-term outcomes for youth and adults with disabilities. She received her PhD in economics. I'd like to invite both of you to please provide a visual description of yourselves and then take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Forber-Pratt. I'm Elizabeth Cardoso, and I have brown hair, olive skin tone, and I wear eyeglasses, and I'm wearing a gray top today, and my pronouns is she and her.
And I'm Purvi Sivak, very happy to be here today. I have brown skin, dark brown hair, and I'm wearing a black and white polka dot dress. My pronouns are she and her. I think we can go to the next slide.
So lessons on youth engagement from the Minority Youth Centers for Independent Living, the MySIL Disability and Rehab Research Project, which is the DRIP. It's being held at Hunter College, and we're working with the Centers for Independent Living as well as Mathematica. Next slide. So we conduct research and evaluation on effective practices for out-of-school youth from ages 14 to 24 and young adults with disabilities from racial and ethnic minority backgrounds. We engage with the community advisory group to inform the MySIL research and learning activities. We have gathered input from people who lived with experience, including youth, young adults, and SIL staff. We are providing technical assistance to increase SIL's capacity to adopt and test promising practices throughout learning collaboratives and consultations. We also have put forth accessible practice briefs, manuscripts, and webinars available on our project website. And today we're focusing on youth engagement. Next slide. So 44% of the youth aged 16 to 24 with a disability are from a racial ethnic minority group, 1.7 million. Nearly one third, 30% of youth with a disability are neither working nor in school. However, most of the large research and evaluation projects have focused on youth that are still in school. Once leaving school, many individuals are disconnected from services. 40% of out-of-school youth with a disability are from a racial and ethnic minority background. Next slide. Hervey?
Sure. So the focus of our project is specifically on centers for independent living. We know that CILs provide transition services. Transition services are a core service for CILs. Other organizations like state VR agencies and schools also provide important services to this population. But we've learned that CILs may be more nimble at connecting to youth across a range of backgrounds. Several reasons for this. CILs may have fewer barriers to service receipt, like wait lists, than some VR agencies that we know have lengthy, time-consuming wait lists. And because CILs are led by people with disabilities, some CILs have staff also that collectively speak over a dozen languages. We think that CILs are in a unique position to connect to populations that may previously have been disconnected or underserved, like out-of-school youth and young adults with disabilities, in particular those from minority or ethnic minority backgrounds. Through the research we've done in the first few years, we've learned that there are tremendous opportunities to increase collaborations with state vocational rehabilitation agencies and other community-based organizations to improve outcomes for youth. I've linked to a study that's on our website by Todd Honeycutt and Frank Martin, which shows that using data from VR agencies, CILs do refer youth and young adults to VR services for employment services, and CILs also receive referrals from state VR agencies. However, the numbers are quite low, and there are, I think, tremendous opportunities to increase collaboration to increase outcomes for youth. I'll mention one recent federal investment that I think shows great potential and also interest in investing in partnerships and collaborations to improve outcomes for youth. And that's from the Rehabilitation Services Administration. They recently funded $200 million in Pathways to Partnership grants to 20 state grantees that require partnerships across VR, vocational rehabilitation, centers for independent living, and school or local educational authorities. So I think just looking ahead, there's more to come in terms of research and identifying best practices. Next slide. So we learned in our early years of research that outreach, in particular to population of youth and young adults that have left school, is particularly challenging. That while CILs and VR as well know how to connect with schools to reach students with disabilities, how to reach individuals who are no longer in school is more challenging. So in this project, as Liz mentioned, we have really tried to engage people with lived experience, including youth with disabilities, to hear from them, seeing them as the experts of what would work well for connecting with you. And so a year ago, we partnered with 3 centers for independent living in Illinois, New York, and South Carolina to do focus groups with youth and young adults who are out of school and from minority backgrounds and with disabilities in focus groups. And we asked them about 3 broad topics. One was, how can CILs increase, expand, and do better outreach to reach youth and young adults, particularly those from minority backgrounds who are out of school? And we asked them also about how to maintain engagement and what kinds of services youth were interested in. So on this slide, I'm first going to share what we learned from the youth on outreach. The participants encouraged CILs to share information about programs and activities, not just on their own websites, but through social media and through community partners. A lot of youth and young adults, particularly those from different ethnic racial backgrounds, might not be aware of the CIL services. They might also not really identify as having a disability or being disabled. They might be receptive to services, but they might not be receptive to the traditional means of outreach that organizations have done. Youth also encouraged SILs to share clear information about the services they are providing. They want to know what they're signing up for and want to know that they're not wasting their time going to yet another organization that might, not provide them with what they need. And they also spoke to the value of offering small incentives to participate, such as refreshments or a gift card. At the bottom of the slide, I have a link to a practice brief. It's short, it's accessible, on ways that SILs can conduct effective outreach to youth with disabilities from minority backgrounds. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we also asked the focus group participants about ways that SILs can maintain engagement of youth. We know often programs have applicants, people they start providing services to, but the rate of disengagement is high. If we look at VR service data, we see closures due to, inability to contact, no longer interested in services. And so we were really interested in learning how, maintaining engagement, how the SILs can maintain engagement of youth. So the youth expressed that feeling like staff and the programs and activities are free of judgment and discrimination was really important. And this might sound obvious, but being intentional about this, especially in recognizing that all people, including people with disabilities, come from a range of backgrounds, was really important to the participants of the focus groups. They said it was good to specify expectations of participants in outreach materials. What was it going to cost? Were there specific expectations about clothing or time commitments? They said that SILs could design tailored programs based on participants' interests and goals, and also the value of social support groups for youth from racial and ethnic minority backgrounds. At the bottom of this page, of this slide, I have links to 2 practice briefs, one focused on how SILs can sustain engagement, and the second one on program and activity recommendations, which I'm not going to discuss today in the interest of time. Next slide. So I've included email contact information for me and Liz if you have any questions or would like to discuss any of our research or have suggestions for work that we could do. And I also have a link to the project website where we have a number of other practice briefs, including data that is specifically focused on SILs across the country and youth and young adults with disabilities, and also manuscripts, recorded webinars, and contact information there as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it back.
Thank you so much. This was extremely informative and really helpful information. I'd like to open it up for any questions that attendees may have. And I think that our new additions folks will remind us how best to ask those questions.
Using the chat feature in the Zoom platform, if you can just send questions to Dr. Anjali Forba-Pratt by selecting her name from the drop-down menu. If you have any technical issues doing that, please email alenhart@neweditions.net. Thank you.
While we're waiting for some questions from our attendees, I'll go ahead and kick us off with one question too, which is, when the youth and young adults were suggesting social support groups, did it come up in terms of the type of format that they were looking for that connection with others? And I'm curious whether you could comment on that.
Yeah, they definitely expressed an interest in having like virtual options like Zoom. Our research was conducted most of our work was conducted in the 2020 and after period. And can you all hear me, Anjali?
Yes.
Okay, everyone seemed to freeze, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, yeah.
And in some of the activities that we've facilitated, we've also seen that transportation can be a challenge. So having formats that are flexible is important. And I've also seen that the in-person interaction is also valuable. So I think just having that flexibility is important and was also voiced by the youth that we spoke with.
Thank you. Any other questions for our presenters? Well, don't worry, I've got another one for you. Where do you hope to go next? Like in terms of what you've learned from this, and I realize this is one segment of a much larger project, but based on what you shared here with this group, where are you hoping is the next direction from a research perspective in terms of what gaps still exist, based on what you've learned?
I think what we've learned, and this is partly why I focused on outreach here, is that outreach is the biggest challenge. We're currently recruiting youth. We have 4 SILs that are recruiting youth and young adults to participate in like intensive services to improve independent living outcomes, including employment. And they're finding it challenging to find those youth from minority backgrounds that we really are focused on here, which is those that are no longer in school. And I think coming up and testing ways of connecting with other community partners, which may not be disability service organizations, because like I said, a lot of these youth are not connected to those organizations. So finding ways to increase outreach and get, people coming in through the door that we know need services. I think that's the next direction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I will mention, since it's quiet, more than one of the SILs we're working with has mentioned trying to connect with populations of recent migrants and refugees and asylum seekers who may be particularly in need of services and may not be finding disability-specific services through the services that are provided for refugees and migrants. And so that's something that we have been talking about in the past few weeks, thinking about how to make those connections.
Excellent. We did get one question here, which is, could you please tell us a little bit about how you use social media to perform outreach?
Sure. For the focus groups that we did, my initial idea was for the SIL directors to send us at Mathematica contact and a list of their current youth and young adult consumers who are from minority backgrounds. And Sharon at Sydney said, no, those are the people that are already engaged. We need to find the people that are not engaged with us. And so she posted on social media, not just through Sydney, but through other local partners. And we had a tremendous response. We wanted to interview 8 youth, and we had 100 respondents that wanted to be involved in the project. So I think that was really telling, that you can't just go to the usual suspects and yeah, talking to youth about where they go to get information, and they said social media. So she posted on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I believe that that's it.
Excellent. Thank you. One question which gets into a little more specifics, folks are wondering, were there any comments about what times of day or days of the week or year would be preferred for this type of engagement or social group programming?
No, nobody did comment on that. I will say that Sydney hosted an event this July for a lot of the participants that had expressed interest in these focus groups in New York. And as it turned out, it was the hottest day of the summer in New York City. I think it was 100 degrees. So I think that's going to vary from location to location. but I think it's a good recommendation to be mindful of that and ask individuals about their preferences.
And I believe this one is a clarifying question, which is, was it the most popular request was for social group programs or that social group connectedness and activities?
I do not know. I would have to go back and check. Yeah, it was an important thing, but I don't know that it was the most important thing.
Have you seen any unique outreach ideas outside of VR sills that you've seen and would like to share with the group?
I guess I mean, I don't know if they're unique, but going to churches, community centers, local housing, public housing, and most recently, as I mentioned, going to agencies that are helping refugees and recent immigrants and migrants, I think is probably an area of tremendous opportunity to serve populations that need help.
Another question here. Do you think the general name of SILS, Center for Independent Living, could be initially off-putting for youth? For example, might 18 to 24-year-olds think that the services offered don't apply to them because they might not be thinking that they need help to live independently?
Yeah, I mean, we came across this actually early on in talking to groups from different and counselors from different racial, ethnic groups. I think the idea of independent living and the value of independent living, while I embrace it, varies from culture to culture. So I know from my own Indian upbringing, what does it mean to live independently when your family embraces an extended family network? And so I don't know if the name might be off-putting. I don't know if a name that's more specific about disability might be more have more response. But I do think that a lot of the programs, the terminology, the philosophies might resonate differently for people from different racial, ethnic, cultural backgrounds.
And sort of a related question to that on that same theme, can you touch on more on some individuals not identifying as having a disability? Did they feel more connected to their disability or to the disability community afterwards?
I can't really speak to before and after and how they felt because we haven't done that research yet. But it was eye-opening for me to hear that there were individuals that, by like NIDLR or other federal agencies would, be considered as having a disability, but that for a variety of reasons that varied, they did not identify as having a disability. In some cases, it was just that the term disability was not one used in their community. So anyway, I think that's an important consideration that we need to learn more about.
Here's another question. What organizations did the Center for Independence of the Disabled New York reach out to when trying to find youth participants specifically for the focus groups?
I would have to go back and ask Sharon, so I don't have a good answer for that right now.
That's all right, no worries. I think that I have got all of the questions that have been submitted so far.
Well, one more. We had a bunch of questions.
Yeah. Thank you for the wonderful answers and dialogue. Such an important topic. Well, and this really tees us up for the next part of our webinar. So thank you so much, Dr. Canoso and Dr. Sivak. We really appreciate you taking the time to share this information with us and providing this excellent framing for this next part of our webinar. Thank you. So now we are up to the panel part of our webinar. And as I alluded to in the opening, I am thrilled to introduce former AAPD intern, Stephanie Picasso, who graciously agreed to come back to join us to moderate our panel today. Stephanie Picasso is a first-generation student who has completed her master's degree in clinical rehabilitation counseling at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, and has been accepted into a PhD program. She's done some neat work with a business incubator to create opportunities for disabled entrepreneurs, and most recently was selected and participated in the Model United Nations program in Italy, and quite literally returned just a few days ago. So while she is perhaps a little bit jet lagged, Stephanie will be moderating our panel with us this afternoon. Welcome, Stephanie. Our panelists today include Dr. Matthew Atterbury, who is SIL staff at the Valley Association for Independent Living, or the VAIL SIL, in South Texas. Dr. Atterbury provides direct services to youth with disabilities that are transitioning into higher education. He provides outreach, education, and training to the community on the rights that youth and young adults with disabilities have when entering into post-secondary education. We have Hannah Gallivan, who is a rising senior in Bristol, Vermont, and is the 2022 recipient of the Deborah Lisi Baker Youth Leader Award. Hannah participated in the Disability Empower Her Network, a project for young people with disabilities to learn about disaster preparedness, leadership, and independent living skills, which they turn into their own independent project. Welcome, Hannah. We also have Miso Kowak, who is a PhD student in special education at the University of Wisconsin. Miso and her family immigrated to the United States from Seoul, South Korea, in part because of the legal protections for people with disabilities. Miso started Disability Disclosed, an inaugural student publication on disability at Harvard University when she was a student there. Miso seeks to use research, education, and the arts to make communities more inclusive and equitable for all. We also have Riley Hurt. Riley is taking a gap year currently, but with intentions of studying at Oregon State University, pursuing a degree in public health. Riley also has participated in the Disability Empower Network Leadership Program and is a dedicated student and passionate disability advocate. When she was just 12 years old, she gave a TED Talk about disability inclusion. Riley's commitment to the importance of disability inclusion has also led to collaborations with local SILs and SILCs, solidifying Riley as a rising voice. Riley is also currently working with the Association of Rural Independent Living, APRIL, to provide professional education opportunities to other young disabled leaders. Welcome to all of our panelists. And now I will turn things over to you, Stephanie, to please provide a visual description of yourself and anything else you'd like to add and to kick off our panel. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Dr. Former Pratt. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie, and my pronouns are she and her. And I am a disabled young Hispanic woman with fair light skin. I have black wavy hair and currently up because it's really hot here in Texas. And I'm wearing medium gold hoop earrings and wearing a fall floral dress. And I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. And I can't wait to have fun. And as a reminder, we encourage all of the attendees to use the chat to submit any questions to Dr. Angeli Former Pratt. Questions will be read out loud during the open Q&A period for the speakers to answer. But before we get to that, we have prepared some questions for our panelists. So are we ready? Yeah. So for the first question, this is for all the panelists. Please provide a visual description of yourself and then describe your experience with disability advocacy and how you got involved and why. So Riley, could you start us off, please?
I definitely can. Hi, my name is Riley. I am a white woman. I'm wearing a tan sweater. I have short brown hair, and my background is kind of a green color. I am involved in disability advocacy because I had a really, really difficult time advocating for 504 accommodations in public school. specifically in elementary school. And that's the same topic that I gave my TEDx talk on. And I am also the third generation in my family to have a neuromuscular disability called CMT.
Thank you. Dr. Atterbury? Could you
Good
go
afternoon,
next?
everyone. This is Dr. Matthew Adderberry speaking. I'm an African American male. I'm wearing glasses. I have black hair, wearing a blue short sleeve shirt with khaki pants on. And my experience with disability advocacy really started for me doing my doctoral studies. When I first started doctoral studies when it was then University of Texas Pan American College, Pan American University of Texas Pan American, when I was teaching disability advocacy and independent living, disability advocacy, disability policy and advocacy, and helped me to realize that I was empowering students to be able to speak for themselves who cannot speak up for others who cannot speak for themselves. And my personal story is that I went through being undiagnosed with autism spectrum disorder throughout my elementary, middle school, and high school up to undergrad, master's, and doctoral program. And I'm not ashamed to say is I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder 2 years after I finished my doctorate. And this gave me an opportunity when I started working at Vail that I don't want students with disabilities make the same mistake as I did to go undiagnosed, and let them know there is hope, that if a person with autism can obtain a doctorate degree, they sure can obtain a higher education degree. And that's my personal mission.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Atterbury. Miso, could you go next, please?
Everyone, my name is Miso Kwak. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you so much for having me today. I am an Asian young woman and I'm also blind. Today I'm wearing a black dress and wearing a pendant necklace. And you might be able to see me wearing a headphone, and I'm sitting in a library study room in the university. So if you're able to catch any background, that's the background that I'm in. In terms of my disability advocacy involvement, I think growing up in South Korea, my mom would take me to places and advocate for me when I was a child. So I think that was really influential, just to learn how my mom was doing the advocacy on my behalf. And then when my family came to the US, I quickly realized that I was at an advantage in terms of learning English and learning kind of new ways of life in America more quickly than my parents would be. So it kind of became, I quickly realized that I had to advocate for myself and also help my parents understand the new systems that they had to deal with. And I think that really pushed my advocacy work. And yeah, I think afterward, it kind of just became the way for me to survive and thrive. And now I study special education and how disabled students are coming to their identities and getting involved in advocacy. So that is a kind of brief story on how I came to be.
Thank you so much, Miso. Hannah, could you go next, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Hannah Gallivan. I'm a white woman with glasses. I have a nose piercing and I have short brown hair and a green sweater with blue flowers on it. And my background is kind of purplish. I first got into disability advocacy because I was born with cerebral palsy. I use a walker and a wheelchair in my daily life. And when I started school, my parents sort of told me that I would have to start asking teachers and people for help, and I would have to start advocating for what I needed. And for a while, that was very daunting for me. But I eventually got more and more used to it. and more comfortable with it. And I am currently a senior in high school, and I really hope to go to college to study film and media and be in a career where I can increase disability representation in the arts. But most of my advocacy really started similar to Riley when I was in school.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your experiences and stories and advocacy. We thank you for being able to do that. And we're going on to the next question, which is even with great strides made with the landmark legislation in like in the Rehab Act over the past few decades, equity and accessibility remains a challenge for so many communities. What still needs to be done, and where are we missing that mark? So Miso, could you get us started?
Yes, so this is Miso speaking, and I think one thing that comes to mind is more intentional and targeted outreach from disability organizations to communities. I think Dr. Sevic talked about this, like how we need more work with immigrant population, refugee population, etc. And I think in order to accomplish that, I think there has to be really targeted outreach and understanding of what it means to be culturally competent to reach those communities. And I think it is also important to mention that community organizations that may not have disability focus, such as groups that may be organizing around racial or ethnic identities or sexual orientation identities, I think it is also important for those organizations to be paying attention to what is going on in the world of disability advocacy and find ways to collaborate. And I think it has to be two-way efforts. And yeah, so I think those are some of the ways that we can start to make more progress in achieving greater equity and accessibility when it comes to people with disabilities who also have other minoritized identities.
Thank you. Hannah, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Miso said. I think our identity as disabled people is so layered. There's people who identify as disabled and LGBTQ+. There's people who identify as disabled and are in a racial minority, all of those kind of things. And I think having intersection between all of these different groups is really, really important. There's a quote that says we don't have freedom until we're all free. And so I think in a very modern sense, like that means that there's no liberation until all of us have everything that we need and are being helped and supported and things like that. And I think a big thing is just making sure that we're reaching out to all of the different communities that exist within our world and hearing really diverse perspectives and increasing representation in media and things like that. But yeah.
Thank you, Hannah. Riley, would you like to add anything?
Sure, yeah. I think the recent proposed updates are great to the Rehab Act, and it definitely makes a huge change for every single disabled person in America. I do think that there are still areas of improvement when it comes to educating people about their own rights with the Rehab Act or with the ADA. I think that's a very big topic to cover. However, it needs to be done. Like Hannah said, we all need our rights. Nobody is truly free until we are all. And that's, disabled people are often left out of innovation. We're often left out of medical decisions. We're often left out of those things. And so understanding our rights and having resources to understand our rights is super important and something that we need to continue to expand.
Absolutely. Thank you, Riley. Dr. Atterbury, would you like to add as well?
Yes, I believe that more education needs to be done in all communities, especially in the areas of education and employment, on one key topic, person first language. Why? Because I believe in advocating for employers to be educated on medical aspects of terminology so they can speak effectively and intelligently on the multitude of disability terms. I'm not saying they should be medical doctors, but what I am trying to convey is this: they must not be ignorant about medical terminology in talking about disabilities. And I believe also in communities across America need to understand that not all disabilities are visible. And that is one of the main stigmas that we have to break, that everyone thinks that all disabilities have to be visible, but in reality, not all disabilities are visible. And it happens in academia, in the academia world of higher education. In general, today, I'm just speaking in general, there are still some professors in academia, in higher education academia, who believe that all disabilities have to be visible, but in reality, like I said, they're not. And those who think that all disabilities are visible, they're displaying ignorance when they realize that there are hidden disabilities.
Thank you, Dr. Atterbury. With the next question, we are very curious for you to discuss what partnerships or collaborations have you found to be helpful on your disability advocacy journey, like with your SIL or other organizations? How can SILs assist with engaging young adults with disabilities? So Riley, we're starting off with you.
Great. So I've had many great relationships over my life with other disabled people. I think it's really important that young disabled people have disabled mentors. And in terms of getting involved with higher education, and even if your goal is community college or trade school, or even just a bachelor's degree and nothing higher than that, it's still really important to know what research is being done. And I think that individuals with disabilities who have higher education degrees, like master's degrees and PhDs, need to start reaching out to younger communities, and specifically high schoolers and undergraduates. I feel like high schoolers are especially not included when it comes to thinking about how we can, expand research and expand youth involvement. When we say youth in academia, nobody thinks about high schoolers, even though they are wanting to be involved. And in terms of how SILs can assist with engaging young adults, I currently live in the capital of Oregon, Salem, and we don't have a Center for Independent Living. And if somebody tomorrow was to start one and ask for funding, unless they had some external funding, they would be taking away federal funding from other SILs in the state. And so federal funding needs to be increased, especially along the West Coast. And one project that I would really like to see SILs do is funding community action projects from members of the community, especially young adults and youth.
Thank you very much, Riley. We will go next with Dr. Atterbury.
Yes. for me, the thing that's played a major role in the assistance of establishing partnerships and collaborations as a public health care instructor at Vail is that I have the freedom to reach out to local public and private schools in the in the Rio Grande Valley community, consisting of Hidalgo, Cameron, Starr, and Willacy counties, and higher education institutions in the RGV, UTRGV, STC, Rio Grande Valley College, to discuss Vail services at health fairs, school transition fairs, career fairs, and doing guest lectures at UTRGV. And also, when I go out and do these outreach activities, the consumers are becoming more realized that, hey, Vail is a very good organization. They can go to get service they need. And before, when I first started at Vail, I was doing most of the research, the background. And then I shared with my supervisor that I was willing to do guest lectures. And what I did was I looked at institutions of higher learning that's close by in the RGV, and I pinpoint areas in like rehab, communication disorders, health, nursing, UNIV, to pinpoint those courses to do guest lectures and talk about disability rights of students with disabilities in higher education and in public school setting, understanding the importance of utilizing person first language, talk about Section 504, the importance of employment for persons with disability via the American Disabilities Act, Title I, employment. In fact, I had an opportunity to do guest lectures within the past year in the area of occupational therapy, talk about the importance of persons with disabilities employment. Also talk about the importance of documentation and confidentiality, and also in special education. And I also believe that centers for independent living need to have more positions like what I do that's geared toward helping students with disabilities who are desired to pursue higher ed, help them prepare for higher education in case those students with disabilities decide not to pursue employment, they want to pursue higher ed as well. And I believe that it's important that I feel every SIL organization across the country should have a position that's a higher education transition specialist that's geared toward those students with disabilities who desire to pursue higher education.
Thank you for sharing different ways of engaging young adults in sales programs. So thank you. We are going to the next question. And Hannah, could you start us off with the next question? And the question is, we know that there are both success and failures, and we learned a lot from both. What is a disability advocacy success story you are most proud of accomplishing? Or what is a disability advocacy failure you would like to share?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think something I'm really proud of is just the amount of advocacy I've been able to do through my school. I go to a 7 through 12 school, so I've been going to the same school for 6 years at this point, which is a really long time. And when I was in 7th grade, it was a lot less accessible than it is now. And my parents and I had to have many a meeting just about like getting accessible door buttons put on different doors and like what's the best route for me to get to classes and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm really proud of being one of the people to be like, this is important, please paint the elevator a nicer color, like put the buttons on the doors. They just recently redid our lobby and it has automatic door buttons. And they also made our theater space more accessible, and they put a ramp backstage, which is really awesome for me because that's a space that I am in a lot of the time. So I think those are a lot of little examples, but I think just in general, I'm really proud of the steps that I was able to help with making my school more accessible.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing that. Dr. Atterbury, would you like to add as well?
Yes. Late December 2021, I registered for the National Council examination that I was going to take originally on July 2022. So after I got my diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, I went back to the registry and informed them that I was diagnosed with disability, and they gave me the steps to follow. And I decided to change the date to August 9th of 2022. And they granted me the accommodation on the day of the test. I was able to be in a quiet room, and they gave me extended time, and the accommodation was approved prior to the test date. And OBTW, I did pass the NCE exam. So that's what I'm very proud of. That's an example when you have a disability and you present your accommodation, they must accommodate. So I give Pearson staff and McCallum for accommodating me, and also the NCE National Certified Counseling Agency the credit for providing me the accommodation that I need when I spoke up. I needed the accommodation. That's what I'm very most proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you and congratulations. Riley, we are going next. Would you like to share as well?
Yeah, it's definitely a failure. And I think I'm still fighting it, unfortunately. I have been trying to seek a evaluation for a autism diagnosis and ADHD diagnosis for quite some time. As I transition from high school into college, I would like to receive accommodations for my neurodivergence and things like that. And so I was never evaluated in elementary school or middle school or high school. And so I was speaking with my therapist at the time. And I told her about how I was struggling to find an adult evaluator for those diagnoses. And she told me that adult evaluators aren't as common because most people grow out of their ADHD or autism by the time they turn 18. And that in and of itself, the whole grow out of it type of thing is incredibly ableist. And there are so many problems with that. But I disagree, obviously. I think it's over time, especially for any disability, but indivisible disabilities as well. People learn to adapt their lifestyles. People learn to adapt their career. People learn to adapt their family life to fit their needs. And I think that even individuals who do say that they themselves have grown out of it, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think that they don't realize what accommodations they are giving themselves. So that is definitely a failure, and I am still looking for those evaluations, but I think it's a lesson that everyone needs to learn. Everyone needs to hear, I guess.
Thank you, Riley, for sharing. And I can totally relate on that as well. Because even if you find someone to evaluate you, there's a waiting list that is too long. So I can relate. So thank you for sharing. And hopefully, we can have more advocacy towards having more adult evaluators available. Thank you. Miso, would you like to add something to this question as well?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's hard to kind of pinpoint what I'm most proud of or what I think was kind of most challenging. And I think I'll be just kind of speaking on generalities, but I think when I feel like I've really tried hard and that didn't feel like, I think like one of the most important part of my advocacy work is building relationship and forging alliances and allyship with other people. And inevitably, sometimes that does not happen. So even if, the outcome I have intended, such as maybe it is a joining college marching band as I had wanted to do when I started undergrad, and that ultimately didn't come to fruition. And I had a lot of support from my high school band directors that that what I was deciding was really good. It was a good decision not to continue in college. And as kind of sad as I was that I couldn't advocate successfully, quote unquote, to make myself join a marching band in undergrad, I think was something that I feel kind of most regretful, or like I wish that it could have been different, is that there was no relationship built with the people that I was trying to, advocate myself for. And I think that's such a missed opportunity, and I try really hard to, build bridges as opposed to making things stressful for everyone involved. I think there is a really value in harnessing those hard times to forge better relationships, and obviously that doesn't always happen. And I think those moments sometimes really do keep me up at night, I will say.
Thank you, Miso. There's just lots of work to be done. We are going to the next question, and Dr. Atterbury, you're going to get to start it off on this question. What role let me rephrase that. What role can or should educational institutions play in promoting youth and young adults' involvement in disability advocacy?
Let me say that higher education institutions should have more programs geared toward those who have intellectual developmental disabilities so that they can have an opportunity to experience college life and be able to transition successful functioning adults in society. I've looked at a website, the Think College Institute for Community Inclusion website, which is Think College, http://thinkcollege.net. There are 325 institutions of higher education across America that have programs geared towards students who have intellectual developmental disabilities, that they can experience having college life and be able to award like either a degree or certificate to help them prepare for vocational. And also, public schools should promote higher education for students with disabilities who really want to pursue higher ed after high school in case they decide not to pursue transition to employment after high school. And most importantly, students with disabilities who are in public schools, and especially in high school, must be taught self-advocacy, because research has shown that majority of students with disabilities who struggle in higher ed is one of the main reasons why students with disabilities struggle in higher education, is because they've not been taught how to self-advocate in high school. And that's very important. And they need to be taught how to be self-advocate and selecting and taking appropriate courses necessary that will fit into the plans of higher education success. In other words, don't just take stuff that when they go to higher education and major in that and doesn't turn out what they want, to avoid wasting money and time. Make sure that they choose the right courses that's going to fit for their higher education goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely agree on self-advocacy is essential. Very important for us to be able to self-advocate as young as possible. But going on to the next individual, I'm super curious, Hannah, what do you have to say about this question?
Yeah, as I said, I am currently a senior in high school, so I'm kind of knee deep into the college and college application process. And I have a physical disability, so it's put definitely a different lens on my college search than what Dr. Atterbury was talking about. But for me, my top priority with a school is like I've gotta be able to move around there better than I do right now. I definitely make do where I am, but it was nice to have the opportunity to go to some places where accessibility was built in versus like added on. And I was able to visit some schools and talk to like their disability department, like the office of disability services or the disability resource centers, and like talk to people that worked there and tell them about a little bit about what I needed and what I was looking for, and then they told me a little bit about how it worked at each school, which was really interesting to know about. I also found that I was looking towards bigger schools in general because they're going to have a bigger student population, and that means more people with disabilities on campus and more resources and more funding that gets allocated to serving those people. So for me, I realize that like the best way I'll probably, or one of the ways that I'll be supported in college is like going to a school that has the means and staff and resources to support a big student body. And of course, like that student body is made up of people with physical disabilities and intellectual disabilities and all kinds of different things. But it was really interesting to see all these schools that were so like disability friendly and forward thinking, and really nice for me as a person who comes from such a small little rural area, to be like I can choose where to go and I can choose when I get to be an advocate versus like it being my obligation all the time, which it sort of has been in school just because I haven't really had any other choice. But now I can be Hannah with a disability when I want to. And then other times I can just be Hannah the college kid, which is really exciting. But yeah, I think they can definitely be, I think colleges have a lot of good systems in place, and they also can be better at encouraging people to self-advocate, like Dr. Atterbury was saying. It's a huge part of being disabled and sort of a huge part of our survival. And also high schools be doing a better job at like transitioning their students for higher education if that's what they want to do.
Thank you, Hannah, so much. And for Miso and Riley, you're both at or will be in institutions of higher education. So curious your thoughts on this, both in your current role, but also looking back over your educational career too. So Miso, would you like to go first?
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is Mitsu speaking. I think educational institutions have a huge role to play in promoting disability advocacy and involvement of young youth and young disabled folks. And I think it starts with increased representation of disability in both the curriculum and the classroom in the school building. When I was in Korea, I went to a school for the blind when I was in elementary school, and I had some blind teachers growing up. And I think in retrospect, that was really tremendous for me to know that there are blind adults who become teachers and who have different kinds of jobs, albeit limited. In South Korea, I would say the job choices are a bit limited, and especially that was the case growing up. But just knowing that there were blind adults around me was a huge asset in retrospect. And I think in the US, that was really hard to find. I had to go out of my way to find disabled role models and ask schools could be teaching how to study for exams like the SAT or ACT to students, but that's really geared towards my non-disabled peers. So then I had to, find ways how to prepare myself as a blind person. And I think in the curriculum, I never really learned about disability history in any of my K-12 education, and not only when I got to higher education. And I was really lucky that I went to a school that happened to have disability studies program. That was really not intentional on my part, but I just kind of found out when I got there, and I was super glad that I was finally learning about, my community and having words to say what I've been wanting to say all my life up to that point. That was really tremendous. And I just hope that there will be more representation of disabled people in the classrooms and disabled kind of the history of disability community, and that like media representation, picking up books that have a good representation of disabled characters written by disabled authors, shown to students in the K-12. And of course, in higher education, I would love to see more of this disability studies program pop up and throughout the countries, so that I wouldn't have to say I was lucky that I went to a school that had disability studies program. I think there is so much work to be done on the educational institution promoting disability advocacy.
Thank you so much. I agree. And that brought so much excitement when you mentioned. I really do hope that more universities do have more disability focused programs. So thank you, Miso. Riley, what would you like to share as well, please?
Yeah. So it's already difficult to learn about civics education in the classroom, especially the K-12 classroom already, especially with recent legislation and political action around preventing civics education and minority history education. I think that learning it is important. Learning it at a young age is also super important, because then you get to see people throughout history that are like you. And I can't express how important it is. However, it is history education, civics education, minority education, it's all under attack. And so I think that educational institutions can play a big role in setting the tone and including disability rights and people with disabilities in anti-censorship and pro-history education campaigns.
Thank you so much, Riley. I just wanted to say thank you so much to our panelists for their thoughtful remarks and comments. I really appreciate all of the information that you were able to share and your stories. And now we have some time for some questions that you have submitted. to Dr. Former Pratt. Doctor, and are there any questions that the audience has and has asked?
There sure are. There are lots of questions our audience has asked. So for this first one, they're wanting to know, what do you look for in a mentor and how can a mentor help you to level up? So Riley, let's start with you.
Totally. I mean, the first thing flat out that I look for is disability. Other than that, I look for other aspects of my identity that I can potentially share with a mentor, like being a woman, being in the LGBTQ community, being in a rural area. I live in a rural area. Looking for somebody who has a similar career to me or similar interests to me is super important. But like I said, flat out, it's disability. It's seeing somebody who kind of shares the same struggles as you and shares the same history as you, and being able to compare notes. I think that's super duper valuable.
Excellent. Miso, anything to add to this question?
Yeah, shared experience and their willingness to both challenge me and support me.
Excellent. Dr. Atterbury.
What do I look for in a mentor? Someone that can relate to my story and be able to understand and support me as a person without judging me, and in conversation when I share my story, and they can say, "Oh, I've been in your shoes. I do have a disability too that's invisible," and just go from there. Be able to connect and be able to relate without being looked down upon or ridiculed. That's it.
Thank you. Hannah, anything to add?
Yeah, sort of what Riley said, just having someone to relate to is so nice. Having someone who I've had a lot of mentors who are, have these amazing jobs and are doing amazing things. And when I was younger, that was super revolutionary to me because it wasn't really ever said flat out to me, look at what all these disabled people are doing in the world. And so I love asking people, what do you do? What do you aspire to do? I love people being real with me. Just being or having someone to be like, this sucks, and I get why this sucks exactly. And or this thing happened, and the other person being like, oh yeah, I've had that happen to me too, and it's so annoying. So sometimes my mentors can just be me venting to them, and that can be really nice for me because not everyone else in my life understands on that same level. So yeah.
Thank you, Hannah. So I'm going to combine a couple questions here. So how have you taken the lessons from the past and translated it into current day advocacy? And the related question was, how can we bring more younger advocates like you into this advocacy space? So either one that if folks want to respond to. Miso, anything to start us off?
I think one thing that comes to mind with the first question, kind of learning from the past, I think I'm able to, something that I'm learning recently is, how do I want to spend my energy and how do I want to delegate the work? How do I, where can I build more allyship from other people so that I can forge understanding? And I think that really is an evolving process for me. That's something that I'm continuing to learn, especially being in the field of special education that is really directly related to, I think personal and professional boundaries are really blurred for me. So I think I really need to kind of think about like what is the most impactful, what is most important to me, and where can I say like, oh, can you help me here with this advocacy work? So these thoughts have been in my mind lately.
Thank you.
I would
Riley,
like,
anything? Oh, go ahead, Matthew. Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Nope. Please.
One thing I've learned from the past is going undiagnosed because I let my pride get in the way and letting this be undiagnosed for 40 plus years, and then for it to be found out I had this after completing my doctorate. And that lesson I learned is that I want to share with students. Don't let pride get in the way of asking for assistance when you get ready to pursue higher ed. Don't be afraid to self-disclose your disability, because if you don't self-disclose, you're not going to get the services that you need to be successful. And don't feel shamed in asking for help, that if you ask for help, someone's going to look down on you. No. Because if you ask for help, ask for the accommodation, and you have the documentation and self-disclose, you back it up, and they say no, then that's going to be on them that refuse to provide the accommodation that you need. So don't let this is why I love what I do. I want to share with students, never let pride get in your way of asking for help that you need, because the principle is going to be the same. It's like when you apply for a job and encourage them to, on the application, say, yeah, I do have a disability. And don't be afraid to ask for that combination of the job.
Thank you, Dr. Atterbury. Riley, anything to add?
Could you repeat the first question?
Absolutely, yes. So the question is, how have you taken lessons from the past and translated into current day advocacy, or how can we bring more younger advocates like you into this movement?
Certainly. The disability advocacy community has a long history of including young disabled and including young community members, more so than I've learned about in any other minority community, especially during the ADA sit-ins and everything. So I think we're doing pretty good as it is. I would say we do have to learn about our past in order to not make the same mistakes in the future. So learning about everything that you can before, if you're in a position of power, learning about the mistakes that were made during the legislative writing process, and how we're still trying to make up for some of those things that were left out, I think is really important.
Thank you, Riley. Hannah, anything to add?
Yeah, I feel so lucky to have been preceded by all of these incredible disability advocates, and have been lucky enough to learn about some of it in school and co-teach a mini disability rights unit in one of my classes last year, which was really, really cool. I think I'm trying to, just like Riley said, not repeat mistakes that we made, and encouraging people in power to see disabled people for the wide expanse of experiences that we are, and just being like, we're here, we're ready to do things, and yeah, just like letting people know that they're not alone, in terms of like attracting more advocates to like these spaces, just like letting people know that they're not alone and there's tons of people who can relate to them. I was really lucky to have people I could relate to from a really, really young age, but not everybody has had that, and it's been so important for me. And so I just want to give that to like everybody I run into. I'm like, yeah, I get you. I know your experience. Like, come chat.
I love it. And without even planning it, you all wove in really strong calls for action in terms of where we can take this conversation, moving forward in our own respective roles. And so at this point, I just would like to say a tremendous thank you to Stephanie Picasso and to all of our panelists, Dr. Matthew Atterbury, Hannah Gallivan, Miso Kwak, Riley Hurt, and to our early presenters, Dr. Purvi Sivak and Dr. Elizabeth Cardoso. And now I'd like to invite Dr. Amanda Riekert, NIDLR Project Officer, to share some closing words. Dr. Riekert?
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for being here today and for your interest in this topic. I think this was really a fantastic webinar and commend everyone who worked on it and who participated in it, of course. I also think the webinar has been an excellent demonstration of part of the reach of the Rehabilitation Act in at least two ways. One way is that NIDLR was created by the Rehabilitation Act. And this webinar highlighted one of the transition age youth or youth and young adults related research opportunities that NIDLR offers. And even Dr. Savak pointed out a really great example of how she stepped back to take the lead of a more grassroots approach rather than the approach that she started with, and just how being open to those experiences and to learning from the people with disabilities and the populations you're trying to reach and other stakeholders is really critical. And then the second way it is an excellent demonstration of the Rehab Act is that it provided an incredible model of people with lived experience in educating us and informing us about their needs, ideas, and desires. And as you know, this is something that NIDLR entirely endorses and supports. And today was just an incredible demonstration of that. I think it's such an exciting time in the United States right now with the additions to the Rehab Act and with the National Institute of Minority Health designating people with disabilities as a health disparity population. And I encourage us all to take advantage of the momentum behind these monumental changes and what we have learned from all of our presenters today and their calls for action to continue to promote and create progress for transition age youth. And I thank you one more time for being here today and encourage you to reach out to those who are presenting, and if you have further questions or would like more information. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining. A friendly reminder to our panel and our moderators to please save your chat if you received any direct messages. Thank you so much again, and you may now disconnect.